It's more fuel for the Republican fire. Angry at the FBI.
This is the weaponization of the federal government at the highest levels.
Congresswoman Elise Stefanik reacting on Fox to special counsel John Durham's report, critical of the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation he concludes should never have been launched. Of course, that led to the special counsel Robert Mueller investigation. He called what the FBI did seriously flawed, lacking analytical rigor, dealing with politically motivated evidence like the discredited Steele dossier. GOP Senator Josh Hawley also tells Fox,
there needs to be prosecutions, there needs to be accountability, and the FBI has got to be overhauled now top to bottom. It's got to be completely reformed. It cannot go on like it is.
The FBI tells Fox it has taken dozens of corrective actions already. But former Deputy FBI Director Andy McCabe says
John Durham has failed to come up with anything new.
Telling CNN on Tuesday,
this was a political errand to exact some sort of retribution on Donald Trump's perceived enemies in the FBI. That's what Mr. Durham has done.
McCabe adds, well, he does regret what the FBI did, misleading a judge to get wiretaps on ex-Trump campaign advisor Carter Page in 2016.
The fact is, we knew what the Russians were doing and had done in an effort to help Donald Trump.
So the Durham probe into the FBI and the Mueller probe has the Russia collusion story back in the spotlight.
This is the gift that keeps on giving, or maybe it's going to be like the Alger Hiss battle. It will never end.
Howie Kurtz hosts MediaBuzz on the Fox News channel on Sundays, and he hosts the MediaBuzz Meter podcast.
It's like a parallel universe. You have Trump allies saying, finally, 4-year investigation vindicates Trump. This FBI probe was a sham, never should have happened, political bias and all that. And then you have much of the mainstream media, which, of course, are invested in a very different take on this because of all their coverage of what was called the Crossfire Hurricane investigation by the FBI. I saw an MSNBC headline. It's a dud. There's nothing new here. We knew most of this. And 4 years and $6.5 million, and nobody went to jail. And basically saying these are John Durham's opinions, but he doesn't have much new to back it up.
Okay, so let's go through that part of it and the Durham report not being anything new. Do you agree with that assessment? I mean, did he really break any ground?
He didn't really break much new ground, and I'll tell you why, based on, somebody's been following it. Although, I used to have all these names memorized, Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, but now I have to stop and
it's a refresher course we need on this again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even these bit players became household names for a little while, but that is years ago.
And people forget George Papadopoulos is really the genesis of this because his conversation with the Australian diplomat starts the FBI going in July 2016.
Yes.
And then the Steele dossier comes in the fall.
There was a report, I believe, last year by a Senate committee chaired by Republican Marco Rubio, which had some criticisms of the way the FBI conducted itself. It basically said this investigation was worth launching. And back in 2019, there was a somewhat more critical Justice Department IG's report that also said there was no intentional wrongdoing and had a lot of the same information. But, I think in a way it's a win for Trump because most people are just seeing the headline. They're not delving into the Papadopoulos level. And they see, report vindicates Trump. Although there were indictments against a number of prominent people, including Paul Manafort, Mueller was never able to prove collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians. Both sides have a point, but what's fascinating to me is how very quickly they each went to their opposite corners.
Yeah, it is always the way in this 5, 6 years, 7 years now that we've been dealing with this. You mentioned Paul Manafort, once the Trump campaign manager in 2016. What they went after him for and what he was convicted of was not related to the Trump-Russia investigation. It was dealing with his own personal dealings with Ukraine and officials there prior to the 2016 campaign, which made it even more frustrating because they got convictions but not really related to the probe into Trump.
Yeah, but then there were all these pardons as before Donald Trump left office. But there was information that came out, even though it didn't lead to a criminal charge, that Manafort was giving internal polling information and so forth to the Russians. I'm just trying to say, I don't believe the stuff was made up. And keep in mind, how can any of us forget, that he is by far the leading candidate for the Republican nomination next year, assuming that he probably is the nominee. Whenever this comes up, if it comes up in a debate or if it comes up in any other forum, he can just say, well, John Durham investigated it and he found the probe was politically motivated.
It's tricky dealing with any kind of Trump news. The media, I mean, when you bring up former President Trump, there's a lot of angles and a lot of people, and immediately anyone watching is going to accuse the mainstream media, if they're Republicans, of being against Trump as they report a story about him being charged or indicted or this or that. And then he goes on CNN and there's a town hall and CNN gets, drilled by people on the left. Why would you give him such a forum? I mean, it's
eviscerated.
He is really hard to cover in the news now.
Even his fiercest detractors would have to acknowledge is he knows how to drive the news cycle. He knows how to set the agenda, even if it's bad news for him. Remember, this is a guy who was indicted by the Manhattan DA's office, and his poll numbers went up. I mean, for anybody else, they'd be toast. Same thing with the being held liable in the E. Jean Carroll civil lawsuit, sexual assault, defamation. It seems to roll off him. So he knows how to sort of work the media, which puts extra pressure right now on the media because the CNN town hall was an absolute train wreck and it was packed with Trump supporters who were hooting and hollering and so forth. But those who said, both before and even after, that CNN shouldn't put him on because he's a destroyer of democracy and so forth. I'm sorry, that is not journalism. That is crazy. Maybe they should have done it differently. Yeah, I could give you 10 suggestions. But at the same time, he's a leading Republican candidate. And what are you going to do? Not cover him for a year and a half? What would that make people think about media fairness?
Yeah, so how should the media handle him as we get closer? I mean, we have debates that'll be coming up, and presumably if he wins primaries and becomes the nominee, I mean, how do you handle he's a presidential candidate?
You got to aggressively cover what he says, aggressively fact check him. It's hard to do in real time. Caitlin Collins did her best. But, there's large elements of the media now that decided years ago that Donald Trump is a despicable figure, and they just can't stand him personally, and also think it would be a disaster were he to return to the White House, which is not an impossibility. It used to be conventional wisdom, 3-4 weeks ago, Donald Trump can't win a general election. He's turned off too many voters to do that. But now, with Joe Biden, 80, 82 almost before the election, 86 at the end of the second term, some Democrats are having to come to grips with the possibility that Trump actually could win. So that puts a lot of pressure on the media. I think we have to, at least those who are not, never Trumpers forever, get back to basics, cover what he says, fact check it, and do the same for President Biden, who a lot of people think gets an easy ride from the mainstream press.
How deep a wound did this investigation, the way the media covered it, winning awards, how much and how deep a wound for the media and for journalism did this cause for a big segment of the population, maybe half of it, on the right, who thought that they were, who can't stand the press? It may not have liked it before, but now they're just, they can't stand it and will only watch and listen to the media they prefer.
Yeah, well, I think that whole thing where we're all in silos and tuning into the people who only agree with us is actually a larger problem. But it's a pretty deep wound. And here's why. Whether you agree or disagree with Durham, whether you think the investigation should have been done or not, the way that the media for a couple of years overplayed and overhyped and over-sensationalized the Mueller investigation, only to have it come up somewhat empty-handed, but I always like to point out that there were a number of indictments and revelations. In retrospect, it's embarrassing. So I think the obsession with that investigation and the obsession with being negative toward Trump did a lot to erode the media's credibility, and I don't think we've recovered from it.
House Republicans want special counsel John Durham to testify at a hearing about the Trump-Russia probe. They are also busy investigating President Biden, calling him
a walking billboard for his son and family. to collect money.
Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer at a news conference a week ago detailing what they say is evidence linking Biden family business dealings to foreign nationals.
President Biden has claimed since the 2020 election that his family has not received money from China. That was a lie in 2020, and he continues to lie.
While Comer says they have bank records detailing millions of dollars in payments from overseas, some dating back to when Joe Biden was vice president, the White House calls it baseless and a personal attack. And there was no coverage of the news conference on the network nightly news shows. The New York Times report was no evidence of wrongdoing by President Biden.
It will change if and when the Republicans come up with some concrete evidence. I mean, even people like Fox's Steve Doocy have called out some of these Republican lawmakers who go on TV and say Biden crime family. Yes, it seems like, I mean, everybody knows that Hunter Biden, by virtue of his last name, was raking in lots of money around the world. That is at the least unethical. There's also, of course, a separate investigation of him on tax and other issues that's supposed to be coming to a head soon. But nobody, including the Republicans, has been able to say exactly where the money came from or what Joe Biden had to do with it. Did he get any money? Did he do anything when he was vice president or afterwards to help his son Hunter and other relatives rake it in? When I see that, I'm going to cover the hell out of it. But right now, I don't think the Republicans have the goods. That could change. And that, if it does change, would obviously be quite a bombshell in the middle of this campaign.
Yeah, I mean, Fox airs the news conference live. Other networks do not. It's not much in, as I mentioned, the network TV, the Times or whatever. They just say that Republicans fail to link President Biden to this kind of stuff. So they're not going to care until there is that link. Is that what you're saying? And you as well?
I don't think the media will be able to ignore it. I think it will be like a neutron bomb going off. But this has been under investigation for quite some time. They don't seem to have anything, but I'm not predicting. It could change. And I think, whatever biases the media have, they're not going to ignore solid evidence against the president of the United States that he did something that he vehemently insists that he did not do.
Howie Kurtz, you can watch him on MediaBuzz on the Fox News Channel, 11 a.m. Sunday mornings. You can also hear him on the MediaBuzz Meter podcast. Always good to talk to you, Howie. Thank you.
Same here. Thanks so much.